Hey, welcome everybody to Pro Mindset Podcast. This is your host, Craig Doman. And today we have a special guest, Maria Gallucci. And Maria is got a special story. She's an author, she's a realtor, she's a leader, she's a community activist. She's very involved in lots of different things. Maria, welcome to Pro Mindset today.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here today.
Okay, so Maria, it looks like to me, um, when you were a young girl and you were talking to your parents, how did that go?
We communicated by ASL, which is American Sign Language, and that was our first language. So both of my parents are deaf, and all six of us kids are hearing. So we communicated by sign language.
Okay, so what happened at the dinner table when all eight of you are at the table and the kids want to talk, but the mom and dad want to be involved? So did you have like a family rule at the kitchen table that everybody had to use sign language to communicate, even though three-fourths of you could hear?
Yes, we did. So my parents, even when we're out at restaurants and everything, we always had to include them. So we would sign when we were talking. So if we were talking to each other, we would sign so my parents can be involved.
How often, like even at school when you were a young girl, did you start using sign language when you were talking to your girlfriends, not realizing, because it's like almost like learning a foreign language. You got to be in the mode. So did you think in sign language or did you think in like pictures? How did you think?
I thought in sign language, and I still do that to this day. Like I'll accidentally sign to hearing people, thinking that I'm communicating with them. So I still do that to this day. So I always, when I think about what I'm saying, I do visualize the signing before I do that. And if I don't know how to spell like a word, I will actually sign it out. It helps me like spell it better.
Well, we have a lot of friends that are from foreign countries that have their primary language is not English, and I always ask them, what language do you dream in? When
Yeah.
you're thinking, what language are you thinking in? And after they're in the States for a while, they convert to English. But in the beginning, they're always in the French or whatever their primary language is,
Languages.
right?
Yeah. And then my parents, I did a study for my essay for graduation, and they actually, deaf people and hard of hearing people can hear in their dreams. Cause I asked my parents, like, can you hear in your dream? And they said, yes, they do. Yeah. Which I thought
Wow.
was very interesting.
So both of your parents are deaf. Um, were they born deaf or did they have an accident?
So my dad was born deaf, but my mom became deaf at 9 months. She had the chickenpox and the measles, I think, at the same time, and that blew out her eardrum.
Did they meet in a deaf school or where did they meet?
Yeah, so they went to a boarding school in Connecticut, and so they met through there through a football game because my dad was actually the quarterback of the deaf school.
Oh, that's super dope.
Yeah.
Super dope. Okay, so you have a book titled Raised in Silence. What's the theme or the thesis of your book?
So it's about being different and that it's okay to be different and not everyone is perfect. So it's about being inclusive and just awareness of not letting people feel left out and just having them feel seen and heard.
So let's say, for example, you had some friends when you're in middle school or high school come over to your home, and most people probably don't know sign language. Were you like the interpreter for your friends and your parents? What was the dynamic like?
Yes. So they would talk to me and then I would tell my parents what they were saying and then I would interpret back to them. So yeah, I always forgot about that part of it. We always interpreted for our friends too when they would talk, even like my brother-in-law or my sister-in-laws, we would still, all of us would have to interpret for them to our parents.
Well, one thing that I have two thoughts. One is that when you were a teenager and you're playing loud music, your parents didn't mind it. They could feel it. They couldn't hear it, but they could feel it.
Yeah. Our houses were very loud.
I'm sure your home was very loud. And then the second aspect is when you were a rebel teenage girl, how did you ever lie to your parents about where you were going and what you were doing in sign language?
Yes, I would think so. I think all of us did. And we would always sneak out. And I don't know why we would sneak out because they couldn't hear the door. But my dad put like a chirping thing on the door. So when it opened, it chirped like a bird. But then all of us were like laughing about it because we're like, they can't even hear it if we leave or go out. But I think it was more of like a scare tactic to get us not to like run away, not run away, but like go out with all the friends.
Well, 5 of you knew somebody was leaving, if
Yep,
it's
exactly.
right. So even though your parents may not have known, so what kind of careers did your parents have?
So my dad was a mechanic. So he was a mechanic for 30 years. He retired as a mechanic. And my mom was basically just a stay at home mom. She did some odd jobs here and there, but she was basically raising us 6 crazy kids.
So the genetics of your father being born deaf, did any of your siblings or you pass that on to your kids?
No, we're all hearing. So we're not sure if it's hereditary or not, but we have the gene that is connected because we did like a genetic thing. So we have long QT is what it's called. It's a heart condition and it's genetic. And within that long QT is the deaf gene as well. And so
Mm.
we do think that it is hereditary, but none of us, we're all hearing, even the grandkids and cousins and everything.
What was the what is the biggest life lesson you learned from being in a family that quote unquote is handicapped because your parents couldn't hear? And there's a zillion different types of handicaps, but in your particular case, your parents couldn't hear. What like how did that impact you as a young girl, especially like in high school when your parents were different than some of your friends' parents?
I think it gave me compassion and a big heart to see, to make sure people weren't discluded or to make them feel included because I saw my parents like get either made fun of or left out of conversations. So I always said that it was going to be my life mission never to make somebody feel like they're not included. So I think it gave me compassion and a bigger heart because I don't want anybody to feel like they're not involved.
What's the biggest danger for for deaf people that hearing people don't realize? I mean, is it crossing the street and not being able to hear a honk? I mean, what's the biggest danger?
It would be the cars because they can't hear the cars coming. My mom actually got hit in a parking lot because someone backed into her because she couldn't hear, and they can't hear the honkings or the turning. So I think the or the dangerous thing is that it's like crossing streets or just looking out for cars because they can't see them or they can't hear them coming.
Well, there's something interesting about being deaf that's different than being blind. Everybody knows you're blind. Everybody can tell you're blind. Everybody can see the way you walk. They can see that you might have a cane or you might have some apparatus that demonstrates that you are blind. But if you're deaf, is there any like code where people can know? Because if I'm passing somebody on the sidewalk and they're deaf, I wouldn't know.
Yeah, and there's not unless they're wearing the hearing aids would be the only thing. But my parents never did, and people mistake them as being rude because they feel like they're ignoring them, and which I've had to stand up for my parents a lot of times because they're thinking that they're being rude and just ignoring them, and I have to turn around and say no, they're deaf.
Hmm.
Yeah,
So what was the dynamics even when you went out to a restaurant? And of course, when you're maybe you didn't go a lot, but let's say you have a family of 8 and they're going to come to the dad because he's going to pay the bill and they're going to talk to him and he can't hear them. So were you proactive in the sense of, letting the waiter know that, hey, my parents are deaf. I'm going to be the one that you're going to talk to for them. I mean, what was the dynamic on that?
yeah, exactly. So we'd be signing too. So I think a lot of people can pick up on that we're signing. But yeah, we would have to tell them my parents are deaf. We're going to go ahead and order for them, or they'll just like point to the menu on what they want. But we always got, I think a lot of people, we always got stared at as a kid and even now to this day. So it makes us a little more self-conscious too, because people are just staring and not knowing that it's like it makes us feel like we're being stared at instead of them being appreciative of the language.
Well, one of the things I see this in sports, I see this in business, I see this in, people's characteristics. When someone has a weakness, and I don't know if you can call being deaf a weakness, but a difference. I'll just call it difference I don't know how to be politically correct on that. But it's like when they lack something, they have special acuity in something else. So someone
Exactly.
that normally, if they can't see, man, they can hear, they can hear like a hawk. What special characteristics did you see your parents develop that you don't have, that they have because they can't hear?
I think when I think they can see, like they can like see through their peripheral vision. And I know we all can, but I think their senses are more heightened because they don't have one of them. So I think that what they can see most is how people are expressions. They can read expressions. They can feel people's energy because all their other senses have to go double
Mhm.
because of that.
Gotcha. Okay. Um, what would you tell a parent who has a child that can't hear so that they can make the make the journey of life for that child the best possible? I mean, like you're in the real estate business, you happen to have a buyer or seller that happens to have a child that's deaf. What's your advice?
My advice would be to just try, like just even learning the little sign language or just like little words and just trying to communicate with them goes a long way. Like if they are seeing you trying with them and you don't have to be perfect, like nothing has to be perfect, but if you're just trying, I think that makes a big difference.
One of my sons took a sign language class in college and loved it, and so he would he when he found somebody that's deaf in the restaurant or whatever, he would engage with them when he saw someone that was signing. Um, what how, so parents showed love lots of different ways. How did you guys show love any differently than hearing people? Like, was that identical, or was there a special type of communication that you had to express love with your parents?
I think we would sign it, and then we'd always do the "I love you" symbol all the time, which I still do to this day. But it would just be by hugging. But I did wonder one time when it had crossed my mind when I was a kid, like I wonder what it would feel like actually hearing my parents say "I love you" instead of it being quiet and just with the signs. But I have thought about that before. But I think it's the same. It's just different. It's just more expressions and hugging and things like that.
So both of your parents don't speak.
No, my dad didn't speak at all. I think I could count hearing his voice on one hand. And but my mom was verbal. Yeah, so she was able to speak. So she can also hear like airplanes going by and things like that. So she was like I think she was 98% deaf, where my dad was completely deaf.
Okay, so what's the difference in dynamic between a parent that's deaf that can speak and one that can't?
You can't get in trouble very much because my dad never yelled at us. But my mom would yell at us and say, "Wait till dad gets home," but then he wouldn't say anything to us. So, I mean, obviously they can sign when they're upset with us, but
That's interesting. Yeah, so the fact that your mother could talk, that probably helped her a lot.
yeah, I think so too. And think that she went to like the speech therapy and things like that during when she was in school, like high school and the boarding school where my dad did not.
So what is your mission right now in relation to the deaf community? What's on your heart? What are you doing? What are you involved with? What is like your mission today?
I think that it's just to raise awareness that it's a very, very, very underserved community, and technology and everything has come such a long way from back then, even now. But I think just to have more accessibility for them, and like the closed captionings, or now they're having interpreters at the Super Bowl and things like that. So I think just trying to make them feel included and not excluded. I think that's my mission. I want them to just be like us because they are.
Um, what is what's like the primary lesson in your book? Like if somebody reads your book, they're going to learn about inclusion, but what other principles are in your book?
So I've got lots of, at the end of every chapter, there's tips and links and everything for people to either learn sign language, but there's a lot of tips in there and there's humor in there. And I think that the main thing is just to don't always think that they're ignoring you or they're being rude or whatever, because nobody knows what everybody goes through every day. And so because they're deaf, but people are assuming that they don't know that they're deaf. So if they just try with them, I think that just to make them feel included instead of, they a lot of them feel isolated, and especially the kids, because they usually go to a deaf school, and so they feel isolated even in sports and things like that, because they think that they can't do as much as hearing people, and that's actually not true. I mean, my dad was a quarterback, so I think that just to make people feel included and give more resources to them.
Sticking on the topic of sports, what is the one sport that maybe deaf people have an advantage? Is there one?
That's a good question. Actually, I don't know where they would have.
I think they would have an advantage anytime there was a lot of noise. And when you want to compete at your very best, it's an inside game, it's not an outside game. It's got to be something where you're in your own heart and in your own head and you're playing your game, whatever that sport is. And when you get distracted by the audience, the competition, the noise, the fans, you start playing an outside game and it changes your whole energy and your mojo in the competition. Where if you're deaf, you don't have an outside game. So like even things like, you know, target shooting and things like that in the Olympics, where they've got to be locked into whatever their sport is, whatever their job is, and they can't be distracted. I guess what I would say is any sport that external forces can distract you, you would have an advantage being deaf.
Yep, exactly. Because you're not letting the audience or anything, you can't hear them to be distracted. So I feel like they concentrate more, and then they're able to get to their goal or what they want to accomplish in the sport.
Yep.
It'd be really good for football because then they always scream in the stands. So
So how when people go off to college or go in the military, you know, they leave home at 18 or whatever, and now we have FaceTime and WhatsApp and all that stuff, but how did people communicate before video conferencing?
they were called TTYs. And so they were just like a little computer, and you put your phone on it, and you would type it, and then it would go to the other person on the other line. And then they would see what you said, and then they would type back. In fact, I was at listing appointment on one of the houses that I sold. They had one of the old time like TTYs, which I never even saw until I went there, but it was like this big, and it looked like it had like paper through it, and so it was really neat. I wish I would have kept that thing, but it was very antique. But they even had it way back then, because that had to have been in the 20s, probably, when that thing was made.
Yes, I've seen those phones, and that totally makes sense because you got to have a way to communicate when you know, let's say you're in a different country or whatever the case may be, and um, you can talk, but if someone on the other end can't hear you, it doesn't do much good. So that's cool. That makes sense. Um,
The video ones were amazing because technology really has gone so far. So now we have video relay services as well, where a hearing person can call their phone, and there's somebody in between them interpreting.
really,
Yeah, just yeah, that's amazing. that one definitely has come a long way.
Hmm. Okay, so I'm sure there's been times where, like at home, back when you were living at home, where it was tense and other times where it was funny. Why don't you share a funny moment where growing up being a hearing child with 5 other siblings that could hear and 2 parents that couldn't, did you guys play pranks on your parents? Share some of the funny stuff that you may have done, all in good nature because your
Yeah,
parents
so
were.
when my brother Chris and I, because we probably got in trouble the most, would get in trouble, our parents would put us in the corner, and then so we'd be on like opposite ends of the kids. It was in the dining room, and Chris and I would still be talking to each other and laughing at each other, and our parents couldn't hear us messing around with each other while we were supposed to be in trouble.
Mhm. Yeah, so you could, you know, create a peace treaty of sorts of what you got to do to get out of trouble, and your parents wouldn't even know you were negotiating at that time.
Yeah, exactly. We would, and then we'd always have each other's back. Like, okay, well, you tell them that, and then I'll go tell them, and you can say all this stuff, and they're not even hearing you while you're talking to them. But if they can read your lips, then that would be good. But not all deaf. I think that's a misconception that all deaf people can read lips, and they actually can't.
Could your parents read lips?
My mom could for sure, and I can too. I think all of us kids can read lips.
Really?
What am I saying now?
I was testing you. That was exactly what I was saying. I didn't even put it on mute. I should have put it on mute and see if you can read my lips. That's funny. So you can be in a loud bar and still know what people are saying because you can read their lips.
Yeah, for sure. And we can if one of us is in line to get like a drink or whatever and the other ones are at the table, we can sign across the whole room to get their order as well. So we can actually communicate when we're on two completely different sides of the room.
So how often are you with a sibling without your parents and you feel more comfortable communicating by signing rather than speaking?
A lot. Actually, I'm more comfortable signing than I am actually speaking. And that's how I've always been since I was younger. And I've always had a stutter. And so I went to like speech therapy to correct that, which it didn't help obviously because I still stutter, but I don't stutter when I sign. It's only when I talk or tell stories.
I would have never known. I I think everybody has a stutter. It's just that some people's stutter is not audible. They stutter in their mind. It's almost like to me, it may not be your case, but for me, it's when I may not feel confident. And so when I don't feel confident, I probably stutter in my head, but it doesn't come out doesn't come out audible. And I think a lot of people do. And it's just,
Yeah.
you know, I have a former NFL client that um, doesn't stutter until it's something important, and then all of a sudden he doesn't have as much confidence and he stutters. And it's like, dude, you're good. You were good
Yeah.
before.
I
We just changed the topic, and now he's starting to stutter.
it started, yeah.
Yeah,
Mine's
because
always when I tell stories, and I think it's because they always told me it was because my brain was thinking faster than my voice can come out, and that's why I stutter. But when I sign, I actually signed really fast too. But it's always just more comfortable for me. But I think it's because it was my first language, so I'm more comfortable in that language.
hmm. Well, tell us about your life. Married
So I
once,
have
twice, 3 times, 5 times, 10 kids.
1,000 times. Just kidding. So I have a daughter who's 33. That's how I know how many years I've been in the business because I got into it because I had her so young, so I needed a job. And then I have a son who's 19, and he's gay, so he's in the LGBTQ community. So, and I always think that the deaf and hard of hearing world and the LGBTQ plus community go hand in hand because they both just want to feel seen and be their authentic self and be included.
How are those two groups of people discriminated similarly?
I feel like people judge them. both sides, like the deaf and hard of hearing community and the LGBTQ plus community. So I feel like it's hard to feel included, and they get, I think, left out a lot because they're different, and I think everybody's different in their own way. But I think people are sometimes uncomfortable with what's not their normal. And so, and I think that's what the motto just try is. I think we can build communities and bring communities together, if we do just try, and not, because no one's perfect at all. No one is. But if you just try, I think that it could make the world a better place, even one or two people.
Do you have a story about helping your parents buy a house when you were 12? Share that story.
Yeah, so we were on our way to the closing for our house, and I think I was around 12 years old at the time. And we get there, and they had no interpreter there. And so they're just putting the papers in front of my parents, and like they're talking, but obviously my parents can't hear them. And so I saw them struggling. And so I jumped in and was interpreting for my parents, just so they knew what they were signing, because they had no idea. It's just hard to understand. I mean, obviously they can read and write and do that stuff, but to actually know what you're signing and to understand it in your own language, I think that's huge. And so a lot of my clients are deaf and hard of hearing, and it's so much easier for them to understand stuff when you're actually signing and speaking your own language to them.
Do you promote yourself in the business as someone that has that ability?
I do. I actually did ASL Realty, which is a nationwide real estate company where I find agents who actually communicate in ASL as well for clients in different states. So it's not just Colorado; we do all over.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people that are deaf that want to buy a house.
Yep, exactly. And I had to fight for a long time to get them to actually have an interpreter there. And now that there has to be, it's an ADA law now that there has to be an interpreter at the closing table to facilitate the closing. And then when we have CHAFA out here, oh yeah, you're in Colorado as well. So it's CHAFA, so it's the Colorado Housing Authority. They have to take classes to get the first time home buyer program, and they didn't even have closed captioning on. So they were just supposed to take these classes, and there was no interpreter, there was no closed captioning on there. So now we have closed captioning for them and interpreters in the classroom if they want to go into the classroom.
That's great. That's great. How did you sent me a couple questions to ask? I'm going to fire them away. How did you achieve financial literacy at 12?
I think interpreting for my parents, and seeing like the paperwork, and I help them with their finances all the time, like even calling the mortgage company or the credit card companies. So, and the banks, like I'd have to help them to go open up banks. So I feel like I learned a lot of adult stuff when I was a child, just to help my parents through everything.
That makes sense. Makes sense. Um, what what is the hardest thing in business for deaf people? Because like your father was a mechanic, and so he just, whether was he working on vehicles, was he working on airplanes, what was he working on?
So he started working on helicopters, and then he moved to the car. So he did all the stuff for the car. So he was always our car person when we were growing up. If anything went wrong with our car.
So being deaf and being an auto mechanic that's like pretty seamless. You can do that. But how do you see people integrate into the mainstream business community if they're deaf? Let's say they are in sales or they're in something like that. Is it impossible? Is it, how do people do that?
I think I think they don't have a lot of opportunities for them, and they should, because they're just as smart as hearing people. And so I think that if it's, obviously they can't be in the military because you can't hear anybody behind you or hear guns. But I think if it's computer works or like things like that, because they get discriminated against, I feel like, a lot when it comes to jobs, because they think that they can't do them, but they can. I mean, that's just a learning cycle for all of us, not just the deaf and hard of hearing community. So I think that the opportunities for them are low, and it shouldn't be.
Well, I think it's not an issue of their ability, capability, or IQ or smarts. It's the ability of the system to be able to relate. And so the more we have advancements in technology and ways to communicate, those people with those handicaps are going to get more opportunities. But it would be very difficult. It'd be very difficult if, you know, somebody was calling you up and they couldn't sell you life insurance over the phone because they couldn't hear your response. So
Yeah,
it's like they're going to be in certain, they're going to be segmented in places where they can be successful. But as technology improves, there's probably going to be a lot more opportunities for people with that disability.
I agree. And especially with the video phone, the relay service now, they can call them through the relay and you talk to the person just as if you're talking to the other person. And so you can communicate through that way too, where before they never had that stuff. And now they do. And then even with like jobs where they have like the orientation and things like that, now they have to have interpreters there for like because my dad never had an interpreter during their like the sales meeting or corporate meetings. He never had interpreter there, and that's why they didn't have like accessibility for that, and now they do. So I think the more we go and the more we, I think, have awareness of the community, I think the more and more we're going to get more technology and things.
What would um, a hearing person learn if they went to work as a deaf person for a day, or they went out on a date as a deaf person for a night, or they went to school? They perfectly can hear, but they play the deaf person for a day. What would be the biggest shock to a hearing person about that life?
I think like if you go to the movies, a lot of them don't have closed captioning, which we're working on. They're getting more and more like that. So if you're going on a date, you wouldn't be able to hear the movie. And then if you're going to a restaurant, you wouldn't be able to hear everyone around you. Or if you're going to the bar or the like a dance club, they can feel the music, but they can't hear the words. They can feel all the beats and everything, but they don't know what song's being saying, what's on there and the words to that. So I think that would be the biggest shock.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. What question would you like me to ask that I didn't? What answer would you like to give?
I think a lot of people don't ask about the book cover, by the way. And so the book cover says deaf in sign language. So it goes to one ear and to the mouth, and that's deaf in sign language. And the dark side is for the hearing world, and the light side is for the deaf world. And with the rose over the ear is for the culture and the vibrancy, and it's just bridging two worlds together.
Do you have a copy of your book on your desk?
I wonder if I do now. I have one in my car.
Uh,
I'm just trying to see, but no, I took it out. Give it away.
oh, I was going to give you a chance to show it off.
I know. I have it in the car.
That's all good. That's all good. Well, I want to thank you very much for being on Pro Mindset today, sharing your experience as a young lady and still today as a person advocating for people that are deaf and other disabilities and situations as well. Where can people find your book if they want to check out your book?
So it's on all book platforms and Amazon. And there's a website, raisedinsilence.com, that has all of the links to buy the book. And I was top new release. So I was on the bestseller on Amazon within 24 hours of the book being released. So it's been really good and it's been successful. And it's got tips, it's got like humor, it's got sad stories. It's not just a memoir. I think it's just bridging the gaps between the two worlds and any culture, not just the deaf and hard of hearing culture.
Okay, so there's somebody out there that knows someone that's deaf that's looking for real estate. How can they find you to connect?
GalucciHomes.com. So my last name and then homes.com. And then if it's nationwide, it's ASL Realty.com.
That's one. Well, Maria, you have a very interesting story. I want to thank you very much for joining me today. I wish you and your family the best of luck, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was awesome.